what we're trying to do, obviously, is empower our people with licenses who treat folks to be more culturally aware and competent. And I know cultural awareness is sort of a DEI buzzword these days, but really that's what the gun community is. It's a culture.
Hey, if you own a gun in California, you should have an attorney that specializes in California gun laws on your speed dial, because if you ever have legal matters that involve firearms, you need California firearm lawyer John Dillon, especially if you have questions about red flag laws, gun registration, gun transportation, or maybe just need to know that your guns are California compliant. Our trusted firearms attorney is John Dillon. John Dillon specializes in California gun laws. Put his number on your phone right now, 760-642-7150. John Dillon, California firearms lawyer, 760-642-7150. Oh, sorry about that.
All right, bridging the gap between mental health and responsible firearms ownership. We're going to talk to a representative from Walk the Talk America. Jake, are you there?
I sure am, gentlemen.
How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for coming on.
I'm good. Happy Father's Day. It's exciting where I am because my two boys are not with me. They're with their mother in South Dakota visiting their grandmother, but I got to play golf with my own dad today. So
nice.
Well,
that sounds like a great Father's Day. Congratulations. Happy Father's Day. My father's in the studio with us today.
Yeah, I heard that. That's awesome.
Yeah, right. I think this is the first time we've spent Father's Day together in
a long time.
In like 20, maybe 30 years.
Yeah,
it's a long time.
Wow.
Probably.
So here we go. Okay, so Jake, let's talk about, first off, what is Walk the Talk America?
Walk the Talk America is a nonprofit. It's 501c3, and we are originated from the gun industry, founded by a guy named Michael Sodini, whose family imported firearms from across the world into the U.S. for multiple generations. And he sold off his part of the company to focus on this endeavor full-time a couple of years back. And the idea was, at its core, to prevent suicide firearm by bridging the gap between mental health and firearms ownership and joining the two cultures. So I am a marriage and family therapist by trade. I practice in Nevada where I'm licensed, and I own and operate a company called Zephyr Wellness. We do outpatient counseling. And I met Mike because I host a podcast called Noggin Notes. And back in 2019, I learned about the organization, reached out to him, and I said, man, this is a really cool concept because I'm a gun-owning clinician, and there aren't too many of us out there. Why don't you come on my show? So he came on my show. We talked for a little while. We met, and became BFFs, and I realized I had a role to play. So since then, I've been involved in the organization. So I'm the mental health of the guns and mental health, basically.
Wow. So being a gun-owning clinician, does that make you a minority, or is that common, or what is your experience?
Social pariah among my peer colleagues is probably the best way to describe it. It's not that bad, but there are people in my professional community who look askance upon firearms and by extension firearms owners. And so they, as much as we like to brag about being non-judgmental and so forth, we really do tend to become pretty rigid in our beliefs. And some of those beliefs are that guns are bad and guns should go away. And we remain ignorant of gun culture. So part of what Walk the Talk does is we offer continuing education courses for physicians and mental health practitioners to learn about what it means to be a gun owner so that we don't chase people away with our own ignorance of the community when somebody comes in looking for help. And then the flip side of that coin is to demystify what the counseling process is for firearms owners so that they're not scared to come in thinking that they're going to lose their rights.
Yeah, that is huge. I would imagine, though, we're talking very broadly about the medical health or medical community in general. I would imagine it's very different depending on where you are in the medical field. I would imagine that mental health folks probably have had bad experiences with patients, and therefore it's led them to kind of a one-sided view. Whereas other people in the medical field probably have a very positive view. It just probably depends very, very heavily on what their personal experience is.
Yeah, I think so. What we're trying to do, obviously, is empower our people with licenses who treat folks to be more culturally aware and competent. And I know cultural awareness is, sort of a DEI buzzword these days, but really that's what the gun community is. It's a culture, and we need to educate our folks to be competent and comfortable having a conversation when a firearms owner comes in and say maybe they're not in crisis, right? Maybe they're not suicidal. And even though we center on suicide, that's not what brings people into care. What brings them into care is a whole bunch of things. And sometimes it's not even about you, it's about your child. So if you, through the course of the conversation, maybe this parent of this kid who's struggling says, yeah, we love to go out and shoot in the desert or whatever, because I live in Nevada and we shoot in the desert. And then the clinician gets all skittish and weird because they don't understand that in our culture, so much safety is built in, so much awareness is built into what we do that we don't just randomly take our kids out and hand them guns and, go plinking at each other, right? So we need to help them understand so that everybody has a good experience. We want people entering counseling or dentistry or primary care or pediatrics comfortable and confident that when they enter in there, they're not going to be looked upon as being weird just because they're in the gun community. And let's face it, like half of Americans either own a gun or live with one. So we can't afford to be willfully ignorant of this. And so in doing so, we want to make sure that the invitation to get care is appropriate and extended to everybody.
Yeah, so right now, if there's a big push, and I don't think I've ever actually run into this, and the reason I don't think I've run into it is because I would remember throwing a fit. People go to their doctor, and one of the questions they ask is, is there a gun in the home, or and that
right.
Really, if we're being honest, what it does is it prompts the physician to decide if they want to have a conversation, and if they want to have a conversation, the conversation is. Guns are bad. It's not. It really, if we're all being really honest and we boil this down, it was an opportunity for anti-gun folks to get the medical community involved in demonizing, guns and
right.
I really truly. I mean, like I said, is there some nuance? Could I have spent 45 minutes explaining it? Yeah, but if you really boil it down, that's what's going on. I don't think that's the role for the medical community. But what do you what is there a role for the medical community when it comes to firearms and gun crime, and if so, what do you think it is?
That's a loaded question, probably more time than we have allotted in this show. But
yeah.
But the nutshell is that this originated from the suicide prevention community, and everybody in the suicide prevention community thought, well, firearms are the most lethal way to take one's life. They're the most effective. Let's at least screen people for depression when they come in for care, and one of those questions will be about the gun, right? And then maybe we can have our physicians, our practitioners have a conversation about, well, if you're sort of depressed and you sort of have a gun in the home, then maybe you sort of shouldn't. And that's not how it's worked. How it's worked is it's just encumbered the clinical staff with yet another screening to do when they already have limited time to conduct whatever they're going to conduct in the office. So it's become cumbersome, it's awkward, it's clumsy, it's off-putting, and nobody's equipped to have that conversation anyway, because quite frankly, the instance of somebody coming in suicidal to, say, a primary care visit when they're just getting their blood work done is infinitesimal. It just doesn't happen. So we've wasted a lot of people's time and money, but the suicide prevention community gets to talk about what they did. They did something, right? We did the zero suicide training with all the doctors in whatever area. So that's where it came from. But really, it's just a big waste. What we should be doing, in my estimation, instead of suicide prevention, and suicide prevention is good, and that's fine, but what we should be doing is getting farther upstream from that and teaching people how to conduct themselves in their lives appropriately so that they remain mentally well. And one of the things that I like to do is teach emotional functioning. So I have a whole video series on what your brain does in response to environment, what your 10 core emotions are. And if you can know that, you can respond better to the environment, you can improve your communication, and you don't slide into depression, anxiety, subsequently leading to possibly suicide. So we need to get upstream from it and stop with the ultimate most tragic outcome, which is self-death or death of others, just homicide, and start keeping people well early on. And if I may put a bow on this, one of the things I say frequently is I'm trying to work myself out of a job. And what I mean by that is when I do things like podcasts and radio shows and YouTube videos and all that, is I'm trying to disseminate the information in the community so that people stop coming through my door. Granted, it's a little bit of a paradoxical business model to say that, but I'd happily work any other job to pay my bills if it meant that I was living in a healthy, happy community where nobody needed my counseling.
So they just did a big study here in San Diego, and they spent a bunch of money, the county did, to get this totally slanted, biased organization to do a scientific study, which was so sloppily done, But anyway, what they found out, they did a study, was trying to prevent or reduce gun violence. And what they did is they studied, everybody that had died from a firearm over a certain period of time. They did a bunch of things, but when they looked at that, when they looked to see, all right, how someone who's died in a firearms involved, what does that look like? And they really found what we've been saying all along, what everybody kind of knows, is that it was like 70% were suicides and 30% were some other kind of homicide.
Right.
And then there was
that matches the national pie chart.
And there was a teeny tiny, I think it was like 29.9% and 69.9%. There was a teeny tiny fraction of, like other. The homicide part, I talked to the guy that was doing this, and I said, well, what kind of homicides are we talking about? And then the suicide part, it was all about, well, how do we prevent someone who's suicidal from getting a tool, one of the many tools they could use to commit suicide? Not what you're suggesting, which is, why don't we solve the suicide problem? That seems like a bigger solution. It's not a Band-Aid. That's an actual solution. And the looks I got were, there was no suggestion from this organization to do that. It was all about, which is exactly what it was designed to be. It was all about trying to clamp down on gun owners and blame gun owners and vilify guns. And that type of thing it does no justice. It does no good for people who are going through some kind of mental health crisis. And it really it's not going to touch the numbers in a positive way like we'd hope. But
I mean, let's face it. I mean, it's not politically expedient to chase down root causes. The root cause may be broken home. It may be inability to tolerate distress. It may be alcoholism. Something much deeper. Nobody's running their campaign to raise money from their donors on, hey, stick with me for 20 years. I'll get this solved.
I'll get it solved, right?
Much more easy is let's control guns, right? Fun to me. I'll go back and control the guns. And people are like, yeah, that'll stop.
Orange County Gun Owners is dedicated to preserving and restoring Orange County's self-defense rights. And if you live in Orange County and want to help defend and restore the Second Amendment, then you need to join ocgunowners.com/join. Orange County Gun Owners is the organization to help get more pro-Second Amendment officials elected. You need to become a member today. ocgunowners.com/join.
All right, we're talking to Jake from Walk the Talk America. And before we went to the break, we asked... let's talk about why should gun owners care about mental health and its relationship to firearms? Why should we care about suicide? Other than obviously the human aspect that, hey, we're all humans, we should all care about each other. But why specifically should the gun owner community get involved, and why does it matter?
Because it improves everything you know about your life. And I'm not being glib or tongue in cheek when I say that. I'm not just, pumping this up because it's my profession. When I got into graduate school, I had a head full of ideas about a lot of things that were implanted over many years. And I was wrong about a lot of them. And I can tell you that what I learned through my education, my training, my experience is that I don't know everything. And being humble and holding loosely to my beliefs and ideas has made me a happier, healthier, more balanced person. And so when I say hold loosely to your beliefs and ideas, I don't mean don't have any. I mean be very, very, very well anchored, but be willing to change your mind. And one story that I'll share with you guys is a little vulnerable, and that's okay because I try to teach men to be vulnerable, and that's how we create intimacy. So that's a good thing. But before I met up with Mike and met all the guys, Walk Talk America, and went to all the conferences and trade shows and whatnot, I was one of those, gun rights, cool, but nobody really needs an AR-15 guys. And even though I owned one, I was like, nobody really needs an AR-15. And then I got into the community, and I understood the difference between need and right. And it's weird because I've studied constitutional literature forever, all the way back to high school. I was in Nevada Boys State. I was a counselor. I was all about rights and seminal documents. But it never really clicked until I got into the community. I really understood the culture of what the firearms community is about, and the Second Amendment and our civil right to self-defense and to firearms ownership. So I allowed myself to change my mind on that. I moved off of the position of, nobody really needs an AR-15. We could probably have reasonable gun control laws, right? No, that's not right. So that's one example of how I've been able to harmonize my life and be happier and healthier and actually be a stronger voice and an advocate for many, many different things, not just this topic, because I allowed myself to be vulnerable, to learn something new, to say, well, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe my ideas about the world aren't all they're cracked up to be. Change my mind and grow. And I think that's why mental health is so important. It's not just about this psychological mumbo jumbo with a bunch of fancy terms and polysyllabic words and people with letters after their names. It's about being able to change one's mind with confidence, knowing that you're going to connect better with human beings down the road. And one of those ways, I mentioned it earlier, is emotional functioning. A lot of men in the gun community, a lot of men broadly are just like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. It's like, well, yeah, but I'm a dude. I talk about my feelings, and I teach feelings for a living, but I teach it in a very solid, practical, tangible way that connects this very important physiological function of what is emotion and how do you use it in a manner that makes sense, right? And through that, you get better relationships, your marriage improves, your parenting improves, your boss-employee relationships improve. You just become healthier overall. So that's why gun owners should care. And if I may put a cherry on top of this ice cream that I just dished out,
sure.
If you're really proficient at your firearm, you want to be mentally balanced so that when you face a crisis, God forbid you ever do, you don't fight, flight, or freeze. You can turn on your logic brain and work through the deployment of that firearm in a concealed carry situation or a home defense situation. That's why this is so important. It's not just about my anxiety or my depression or my mood disorder. Yeah, those are all interesting and important things that may bring you into the office, but it's about day-to-day living. And that's what I say. I want to work myself out of a job. That's why I push this information to the public. I want people solving their own problems in their own kitchens and their own workspaces.
It's interesting. Years ago, I was on local NBC, and we were having a debate over a couple of different gun things with somebody from the Brady organization. And in the green room before the show, I got to talking with them. And at one point, they actually indicated to me that guns were actually a cause of suicide. And I remember really kind of digging in there and going, wait, you're actually saying that guns cause suicide, that there are situations where a suicide would not have occurred if not or someone wouldn't have had suicidal thoughts had there not been had access to a firearm. And one of the things, which I think is ludicrous, but one of the things I talk about is there's a real good comparison with Japan. Japan has a significantly higher percentage of people who commit suicide and have no guns.
Right.
So what I want you to talk about is, first off, the comment that they made or what they were indicating that firearms somehow actually cause suicide, and then the comparison to Japan. Is that fair?
No, it's lunacy. Firearms do not cause anything. Firearm is an inanimate object, and it just sits there. Now, are you more likely to reach for that in a moment of crisis because you know that it will end your life much more rapidly and more effectively than, say, the pills in the medicine cabinet? Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can have that discussion. But we can't have this discussion that it somehow causes suicide. That's absurd, and we have no empirical research to justify it. And look no further than Japan. Also, Connecticut, I believe, was the first state to implement a red flag law, and I think it was 2009. And Connecticut, thumps its chest very sternly, and as do a lot of these other states that have had red flag laws for a number of years. They say, look, our gun suicide rate has gone down. Yeah, cool. Well, what's your overall suicide rate done? Just like every other state in the nation, it's gone up, except for Nevada. Nevada held steady between 2020 and 2021. We're very proud of that. We didn't go up or down. But every other state over the last 12 years has increased in its suicide rate, and that's because America as a whole has increased in its suicide rate. So all you did was squeeze the balloon, and you made air go from one area to another. You didn't actually address the problem. So addressing the problem is what we want to do. We want to have reasonable conversations about this that have nothing to do with the inanimate object by which you choose to take your life. If we're going to have that conversation, we need to talk about high places and sharp objects and ropes and all sorts of things, right? So that for me, that's a non-starter.
Yeah, our organization, this gun show, we're completely against gun violence restraining orders. I personally have seen them used predatorily, and it's a mess.
Yeah,
they're not good. And that's just more evidence that we're right on that. But I want to talk about what you just said about Americans. There's an increase in suicide. What? Talk about that. Why are we? We're the freest place on earth. We're the richest nation. Whatever. Blah blah blah. All these positives. Why are Americans committing suicide?
Well, I'm going to go into opinion land here and deviate from the literature for a moment, and I think that it's largely because we are so opulent. We've become bored, and we have to take up fights that don't need battle. So a lot of the cultural battles that you see these days that occupy news headlines, they're people who have so much free time and resources that they need to conquer something. They need a conquest. And Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. And, in a country that's so rich in resources that we don't have anything really to fight for, what do? You make up fights, right? Now, if we peel that back just a little bit, there is some research now from Jonathan Haidt, Haidt.
Yeah, big fan. Big fan of his.
He's great. He's now starting to conclude, not just simply make correlations, but conclude that social media is the leading cause of teen mental illness in America. And so when I do talks about this with parents and school groups and so forth, I say, get your kids off social media. I don't care if they're already on. I don't care if you haven't started. No social media. And 4 or 5 years ago, I could have made an argument that there's maybe a reasonable plus minus there that balances out. I can't anymore. And the research proves that. So I think in addition to our opulence and becoming fat, dumb, and happy and not having any real, battles to fight as individuals or collectively, we also have multiple distractions that pull us away from our roots. So think back to when I said it's okay to have beliefs and opinions and be well anchored in them, but hold them loosely. I think largely we've gone unanchored, and now people are simply adrift, pinging off of each other and what grabs their attention in the next brightest, shiniest thing. And that's not good either, because if you're not anchored and you don't know who you are, you can have some real personality issues. You've got some real identity issues. And as these identity and personality issues fail to be anchored, what you end up becoming is a reflection of what looks cool. And so when that happens, you're left adrift in the metaphorical sea, and as the winds blow, your ship gets tossed back and forth.
2 minutes.
You don't know where you're going. You're very lost. You're very confused. It's very wet and stormy, and you have no anchor. And that is why people are taking themselves out of life. They're diving into drugs and alcohol. They're opting for alternate identities, all in a pursuit of something tangible that makes them anchored. And unfortunately, everything they reach for is fleeting. So I think that's why America's suicide rate continues to climb in spite of all of our decadence.
Everything they reach for is fleeting. That sentence right there is just about as so. Wow, that's really, really sad. It's a horrible thing to think about.
Yeah. I mean, if you create something for yourself that you want to achieve, thinking that you're going to find happiness, being that you're the one who created it and it's no bigger than you, you've essentially made yourself God of your own world, except once you arrive, there's something else beyond that yet to be discovered. So it's a never-ending cycle. And when I talk about happiness, which is one of our core 10 emotions, happiness is not to be pursued. Happiness is to be found in the moment. And moment by moment, you can find this. So instead of looking for an arrival point, what you want to do is just be grateful now and find reasons to be appreciative and give thanks. And that's what really floats people. It's not some destination. It's actually, it's the journey. And this is, there's a song lyric about that somewhere, I'm sure. But I think that's what we've lost. We've lost gratitude. We've lost appreciation. And if we take this back to the firearms community, let's make sure that we're being grateful and appreciative and modeling this for our kids when we go out to the range, or we take up another class, or we roll our eyes at the CCW that I have to recertify for this Saturday to pay for my own right to carry. I can shift my focus and say, you know what? No, this is a good opportunity for me to be grateful that I do have the resources to own a firearm, the access to practice, the people around me to make me better, et cetera, instead of lamenting the, whatever it is, the cost of ammo.
You know what? You got to get your own radio show, dude. Hey, have you ever wanted to get a pilot's license? Well, you can do it here in San Diego. Pilots can fly almost every single day. And San Diego makes one of the best places to learn how to fly in the world. You can learn how to fly with San Diego Flight Training International. You can check out this great deal. Just for gun owner radio listeners, you can get 1 hour of ground school and 1 hour of flight with an instructor. Yep. You'll actually get to fly. Normally it's $400, but for you guys, $350. Getting started is super easy. Call them at 858-569-1822, or you can just go to Learn to Fly with SDFTI. That's 858-569-1822.
Yeah, Dad, you and I were just kind of talking about like why everything's kind of falling apart. People are unhappy, and we were talking about how just the other day we were having a conversation. I was saying that nothing seems to be special anymore. That no one's accomplishing anything. People are frustrated. It's and our guest Jake said that we're all fat, dumb, and happy. And I don't know. What do you think, Dad? What percentage of the you told me the other day that you've been alive for what percentage of the United States history?
I'm 80. I was 82 2 days ago.
Yeah,
that's about 1/3 of the entire existence of the United States of America.
So what do you think the issue is in your 82 years? If you had to give a couple sentences.
I'm not much of a philosopher, so I'll kind of pass on that.
Yeah.
But he is a politician. Did you see that answer?
On Father's Day and after your 82nd birthday, what advice do you have for an 18-year-old going into the world today?
Well, I think I do look back a little bit. You kind of live for the moment instead of trying to cure the problems of the world and as it reflects on you. You enjoy the moment.
Right.
You enjoy the moment.
Well, I think an 18-year-old, if they don't know what they're doing, needs to go in the military for at least 2 years.
Well, I was 25 years in the Navy.
Yeah. And probably before you went in the Navy, did you plan to stay 25?
No.
No. You just didn't really know what else you wanted to do. I didn't either. I went in, and it was like, whoa, talk about it's meant to cut all your hair off, man. It messes you all up.
Well, there's a Jake. There's actually Jake's still there. Jake, there's an organization in town. This guy, great guy, who runs it, and it's called Boys to Men. It was started a couple decades ago, and what they do is they go into schools and they say, okay, principal, show us the 4 or 5 kids or 2 or 3 kids that are causing all the problems, and they take those kids and they put them into this program. And it was interesting talking to him. 80-something% of these kids don't have a dad, and he's talking about, and they set them up with, men who are mentors, and they do events where they have to accomplish something. To me, it actually kind of sounded like I was a Boy Scout. It kind of sounds like Boy Scouts. And really what it is it's this rite of passage that people have to go through. They have to accomplish things. They have to prove things to themselves and others. And, his track record of improving people's lives is amazing. And I think that's part of what you're describing when you're talking about how, what's gone wrong with society today.
Yeah, find some anchoring, right? Get a role model, get somebody who's walked a path ahead of you and can show you how to do it. And then honestly, what you're describing sounds a lot like our Kids to Kings program. It's not our program, but we partner with Kids to Kings, and Devin Perkins is the guy who leads that up. He's down in Georgia. And what he does, he goes into schools and he takes these inner city youth and teaches them gun safety and also well-being, not just mental, but physical and emotional and social well-being. He primarily focuses on black kids. Devin's a black guy, and he's in Atlanta. And that's what he's doing. He's pulling these kids largely fatherless and putting them through a program, and he integrates gun safety because in the inner city, there's lots of illegal, unsecured firearms, and he's teaching them how to avoid them, use them properly, know what to do when, confronted. Kevin Dixie, who's a good friend of ours too, he's now also in Georgia. He's originally from Missouri. He does a similar type of thing with dads, though. He focuses on the dads, and he pulls them in and teaches them, good fatherly behavior to get intimate with their kids. And I think that's what's lacking, honestly. It's intimacy. When we're staring at our screens, we're separated. When we're diving into our work and we don't have any good boundaries, we take our work home with us, we're separated. And we need to return to the nuclear unit of the family so that we can connect in a healthy way. And, it's not just, shaking our finger at our children anymore, but they're actually seeing us model what we want of them, which is consistency and good values and good boundaries and so forth.
You were talking about Jonathan Haidt, and I've really just loved his work for years. And for those who don't know, I've talked about him on the show. We actually tried to get him on the show, but I've talked about him on the show before. What I know, where I first found him is he was a professor at NYU, and he was self-proclaimed left of center. He thought he was fairly left of center, and he started doing his research on why people make decisions or why they have the opinions they have, especially politically. And he came up with his 6 moral foundations theory. And San Diego County gun owners, Orange County gun owners, our Inland Empire gun owners, our entire messaging is based on his research, which is I think it was groundbreaking research on how people communicate with each other. What's important to people and why they actually base their communications on, or what they base their opinions on, which is fascinating. I'm not going to give a whole lecture on what he found out, but that's how impactful it's been. Is political messaging ran with it. A lot of different messaging ran with it because he did such an amazing job. But then after that, he went in and did some research and he tried to figure out where the woke culture started and came from, and tracked it down. And I guess the reason I bring that up is I want people to know this isn't some far right-wing, guy with an agenda. I mean, this guy was self-proclaimed, way left of center, has done some really impactful research and work, and I'm glad you brought him up. Talk a little bit more about him and what he's found and what you like about him.
So the first thing I'll share is his Substack is just his name, jonathanhaidt.substack.com. You find all this research, and what's cool about it is it's open source. Not open source meaning you can contribute to it, but it's all presented in like a Word doc, running Word doc, or spreadsheet, where you can see why he's done what he's done. And his colleagues, Greg Lukianoff at FIRE, which is a free speech institute, and Gene Twenge, who's written some books on Generation Me and iGeneration, and they're at the forefront of this stuff, and I'll just drop some knowledge real quick. So if anybody's familiar with statistical analysis or statistics, there's something called an R value that's a correlational value, meaning if two things are highly, highly correlated, like gravity to falling objects, you'd have a 1-to-1 correlation, be 1.0. Something that's not very correlated, the number gets smaller. So less than 1, not negative, but less than 1. So, for example, somebody did a study on eating potatoes and mental illness, and the correlation is 0.01, so not correlated. And if you get into public health matters, when they start to launch public health campaigns, like say, I think eating extra calcium for postmenopausal women to boost their bone density and avoid osteoporosis or whatever it is. That's like a 0.08 correlation. So getting higher, right? And usually public health, they want a 0.05 or higher. All right. So when we're talking about teens and their connection to mental illness through social media, boys have a 0.09 to 0.11 correlation of exposure to social media and mental illness. Girls are double that. They're between 0.2 and 0.22. So we're like off the charts. There should be public messaging about keeping your kids off social media. Now, let me drive this point home real quick. The correlation to lead exposure in childhood and brain damage in adulthood is 0.09. So it's equal to or less than boys and half as much as girls, and yet we just hand our devices to boys and girls. Jeez. And this is what Haidt found in his research. It's scary,
so
right?
what's going on? Like what's happening on social media that's giving them mental health issues?
So not all social media are created equal. For boys, the reason it's a little lower is boys tend to be a little more resilient, a little more solve their problems and move on. Girls tend to linger. But separate and apart from that, boys' social media looks something like role-playing games, action games, Roblox, Minecraft, where there's an interactive component and a chat feature. Girls tend to draw more toward the image stuff, so like Tumblr and TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat. And within those realms, what happens is there's constant posting. There's feedback on the posts in the form of likes and comments. And you can hear him explain all this stuff. Look up Height on any podcast, and he explains it much better than I do.
2 minutes.
But what ends up happening is these girls get into a competition. And it's not enough just to turn the phone off and set it aside, because even though they set that aside, say, for school, their brains are still thinking about what they're missing. Boys don't tend to do that, because they're playing games with other boys, they turn it off and they go to class and they're there, and they're all there. So they're not really missing anything in the posting culture. So that's what's happening. Not to mention the bullying and the targeting and the grooming, and I don't mean just like sexual grooming, but like advertisement grooming. People are trying to recruit your kids to buy stuff, and they do that through getting them to buy it through you, right? So there's lots and lots of pressures to keep up and catch up and compare and contrast. And ultimately what that does is it erodes self-confidence to the point that they just get full of anxiety and depression.
Wow.
And then it leads to identity disturbances and suicidal ideation and self-harm. So it's all very not good.
Well, this has been fascinating.
1 minute.
I'm really glad we went into this. It was a little kind of maybe not exactly on topic, but how fascinating. It's great information. But let's circle back. Talk about Walk the Talk America. Where can people find more about Walk the Talk America, and how can people help?
WTTA, Walk the Talk America, WTTA.org is the website, and you go there, get a free and anonymous mental health screening. Well, everybody likes free, and most people like anonymity, so you get a free screening. That helps you check in on yourself. We also have a bunch of resources. We're building out a 50-state provider directory. I'll make a plug for my own agency, even though we're in Nevada. We got a lot of resources there. zephyrwellness.org. You can find my emotional functioning video series on that, too.
Thanks for watching this clip from Gun Owners Radio. If you're watching mainstream media, you're not getting the truth about guns. Gun Owners Radio is the easiest way to stay on top of the Second Amendment fight, the fight for your self-defense rights. You can watch our live stream on YouTube every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, or if you're in San Diego, AM 1170, FM 96.1, The Answer. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform. Just search Gun Owners Radio and you'll find our show. Like and subscribe to help defend and restore the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.